Well, on that theme, it has been confirmed that at the end of this coming week, September 7th, which is this coming Friday, a week from today, there will be a town hall meeting sponsored by Congressman John Conyers, officially in Detroit, on the subject of the bankruptcy of Detroit and on the question of the legality of whether or not the pensions of the city workers can be abrogated at the expense or for the benefit of the fulfillment of the obligations to the Wall Street banks. Now, your approach to this question has been unique and indispensable over the recent weeks. Bill Roberts, who is a member of the policy committee there and a former candidate for Congress, has been consistently meeting with members of labor, city elected officials, and others, and is continuing to bring the issue of the retooling of the machine tool sector that Detroit represents to the table as the only exit strategy from this situation. Now, what constantly comes up, and I think this is something that you just referenced, is the fallacy that people have that all you're going to do is just fix the problems, fix it, repair the things that have already been broken, and fill some potholes and something like that. But you've constantly been emphasizing that the only metric that you can actually bring to history is one which is at least a century in its span. And then when you begin to subdivide a century into generations, you get 4 cycles of 25-year generations. And the idea of economic reproduction, not just a reproduction of the ability of the last generation or the last cycle to support itself, but as has been called an expanded reproduction, the ability to move beyond anything that you came before, requires this idea that you've just been addressing of leaps in technology. How can we get this idea across, which is in the bones of the American people? This is what we experienced under Franklin Roosevelt and experienced under John F. Kennedy, but it seems woefully to have been forgotten. How can we get this idea adequately across to the American people?
Go back to the first and second decade of the last century, when the accounting was invented. And it was the banking system which invented the accountant and prescribed what the accountant was allowed to do and not do, which created this whole mess. Now, the accountant's mentality is actually a conditioning if he follows his rules. His condition is to act like a monkey. What I mean by that is that he's not supposed to be creative. He's not supposed to be noetic. He's not supposed to invent. He's not supposed to change the rules. Now, the changing of the rules is a very ancient practice for mankind. It goes back 1 billion years or so. And that is that mankind, unlike the animals, voluntarily increases the productivity of the human individual. In principle, not just in form, in principle. And because mankind is the only creature which goes from lower levels of energy flux density to higher, the only species. And the success of the human species depends upon those conditions under which that kind of development is occurring. Now, if you have an accountant comes in and tells you you've got to be practical, and you say, well, take all practical men and put them in the zoo where they belong, because they are not creative. You take the human species. We started with a little fire down there in Africa. That's the first track we had on it. And you had 2 people that looked like monkeys with their behavior, but one was using fire, the other was not. The one who was not using it turned out to be the monkey or the ape or whatever. The one who did use improvements through the beginning of fire became the human beings. Now, the human beings have made developments. How? By increasing the energy flux density per capita of the human species. We're now at the thermonuclear fusion level of hot. Now, that's our level on Earth and beyond Earth. And you've got people who are still sitting there with green eye shades, or at least of the past, a memory of the green eye shade, saying that they're simply going to do, by fooling with the numbers of an accountant's number book, are going to determine what the policies of the nations are. That's idiocy. It's always the increase of the energy flux density which the human mind can muster. And we're now in the thermonuclear fusion age. And if you want to decide how to deal with the problem of the United States and Europe and so forth and the planet as a whole, you've got to get into the thermonuclear age. It has been here for some time. I became acquainted with it very closely back in the beginning of the 1970s. And this thing is now getting riper and riper and riper. It's like being held back. We are now in a position where we can begin to really move to take charge of Mars. I'm not recommending putting people on Mars, but I am for putting useful objects on Mars which can do things which we need to get done there. So therefore, there are no limits. We're at the thermonuclear age and beyond. And we've got to understand that. We've got to use those kinds of technologies. We've got to grow up. We are not monkeys. Monkeys will do the same thing. They will follow their tradition all the way around. But we're not monkeys. We're human beings. And we will always go to higher orders of energy flux density because we're truly human. We are unique. We're the only species we know in the entire universe so far. There are probably other people out there who have some knowledge, but from our knowledge, no. We on Earth are the only thing which has intelligence. And intelligence is creativity. Human intelligence is creativity per se. We're now at the age of thermonuclear fusion, headed toward matter-antimatter development. Let's recalculate everything on that basis.